Welcome to Generally Speaking, the off-season edition. I'm your host, Angelo Fioris. You can find me on Twitter at NJ_Generals. We're part of the USFL Today, which you should also follow on Twitter at USFL Today, and then jump over to YouTube so you can catch all of our great shows. That's also at USFL Today. Set your notifications. Don't miss a single episode. I'm super excited for today's edition of Generally Speaking because it's the first one that I'm doing with a co-host that isn't a player or the Generals GM. And I'm happy to bring aboard a newer member of the USFL community from Gridiron Heroics, Angela Miele. Angela, welcome to Generally Speaking. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here, and I'm doing well too because we're getting every day a little closer to the USFL season, and I can't be more excited. How about yourself on that?
You know, I'm very excited. I'm excited to get into it for the first time, genuinely.
Yeah, we were chatting a little bit before we started the show here, and you're new to the USFL community. You're one of the only other people aside from myself who are putting attention to the Generals specifically. So how'd you get into the community? Tell us a little bit about who you're affiliated with, and let's get to know you some.
Yeah, so I work for the website Gridiron Heroics. It's just writing about all things football, all the leagues, even college. And we put together a small group to start doing the spring leagues. And being from Jersey myself, I decided might as well get into the Generals. And with how small the community is, it's just been a great time, you know?
Have you had fun interacting with all the various lunatics?
Oh, it's been great. I love when, the draft, and I apologize because apparently my washer's in the spin cycle right now.
Can't even hear it. You're good.
But, promoting the articles, the draft just happened and getting everyone yelling at me that these players will never even see the light of day. And I'm just spreading the information here.
Right. You didn't invent the format.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to the community. It's excellent to have someone else covering the Generals and be able to talk about the team a little more intimately, let's say, than someone who doesn't cover them. And also cool to be doing a show with Angela and Angelo now. So that's pretty cool. The Ange and Ange show. So we're off to a great start. So let's talk a little bit, Angela, about the Generals and their draft. The rights that they drafted the other day. I'm one of those guys that's really sticking to, they didn't actually draft players. They drafted their rights. 10 of these 10 guys ain't waltzing into camp in 4 weeks. So it seems like people misunderstand that and they think that rosters have been restocked.
Yeah.
I've tried my hardest to communicate to people that it's not the case. I've seen you as well doing the same.
Yeah. I think more will be also seen after the NFL draft. We got a couple guys, especially the punter from Rutgers.
Yeah.
I firmly believe he's going to get drafted into the NFL.
No question about it. He was the Ray Guy Award winner. He's going to get a look. Someone will grab him, maybe even the Jets or Giants. You never know, and try to keep the guy home. So he was one of the more interesting picks, I thought, if only it seemed like they were going for some hometown touch there. And then also my second most interesting selection of the 10 was a couple picks later, Vecchio from Purdue, the long snapper, who's also a Jersey guy. He went to Cedar Grove. So could they possibly be foreseeing a future advertising campaign? Hey, Jersey, come see your boys, and it's the kicker and the long snapper. I mean, I find that kind of hard to believe. It sounds like a pretty long game to me, if that's the case. But those were my two more interesting picks, just solely based on where they're from and their positions too.
Yeah, I was surprised, especially with, they were tweeting it out, of course. And when they tweeted out about Horzak, the punter,
right.
They were like, we're really excited about this. And I was like, I am too. I'm a big fan of his, I support Rutgers. But I'm also sitting here like, he's going into the NFL. I don't know much about the long snapper, but I agree it could be that New Jersey side of it.
Yeah, because from what I know about the roster, the only player with New Jersey roots is Trey Williams, who was born in Orange and started, he grew up his early years in New Jersey, and no one else. So if it's part of future marketing, It's not a bad idea. But I think that I know every draft is speculative, obviously, but the way that this draft was set up, Ange, it's even more speculative because, like you said, a lot of these guys may not even sign right away and put themselves through the NFL camp, undrafted free agent, practice squad process before they finally decide what their next move is going to be. So, majority of these players may see the field next year. At least a few of them, maybe one or two could even sign this season if they cycle out of the process early enough. I think it feels like to me for the majority of the guys who are going to try to stick it out all the way to the end, timeline wise, it doesn't line up for them to make it to the team this year.
Yeah, that's going to be too hard because April's always the draft and then April's this. So I agree. It's going to look more next year for them.
Yeah, possibly you could see some late season, injury needs filled by one of the players that were drafted and a team holds their rights. But then again, that's going to have to be really specialized because they'll have to have a specific need at that moment for him to bring him aboard too. So it is going to be interesting. No doubt about that. Because there are some new names to just kick around. You wrote a great article summing up all of these players that were selected. And so why don't we just talk about them a little bit? Because even though they may not be on the roster now, or maybe not in the future at all, it doesn't hurt to learn about new players, right?
Yeah, always.
Yeah. So let's talk about the two we talked about first, right? You mentioned the punter from Rutgers, Adam Korsak. Talk about him a little bit. He's a Rutgers guy. You've seen him play.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's no secret Rutgers did not have the best offense. So he saw the field more than most punters. And the fact that he got so many non-touchbacks consecutively, he has the NCAA record for most punting yards. I mean, if he does join the Generals, that would be a big pickup.
It certainly would be. I don't expect it to happen this year, and I don't think the team does either. They just re-signed Brock Miller, who is excellent. The guy booted a 91-yarder last year in the game against the Stars. So I believe, at least for this year, his job is safe. There's not going to be competition from Korsak because he will be, like you said, definitely drafted and probably playing in the NFL this year. Definitely in the preseason for sure. Yeah. Speaking of the other end of the kicking spectrum, right? We have from Purdue, Nick Zecchino, right? And he was the long snapper from Purdue. He did go to Connecticut for 1 year, and he was academic all Big Ten. So he is a solid special teams addition should he slip through the cracks of the NFL process and end up in the USFL, even if it's for next season. The Generals are in a bit of transition at long snapper. They've moved away from Scott Flanick, who was the snapper last year. They've signed the player from he's from Washington, went to Nebraska, Jordan Ober, I believe is his name. He is the new long snapper for this season. So I wonder, will it be a competition? Will Zecchino come right into camp? Could he be one of those guys, or will it be the new long snapper's job coming right out of the gates?
No, I agree. That's going to be one to watch because I'm not sure. I'm really not. I haven't heard his name, but with long snappers, it is a little later if they are drafted. So
right.
That's going to be one to watch, definitely. And long snappers are important. I mean, you get one bad snap and you're done.
Well, and that's just it. Every long snapper is one bad snap away from the unemployment line. And even if you've had a good season, you might find yourself on the wrong side of the ledger when cuts are announced. Like for myself, I was a little surprised that Scott Flanick was released when he was, simply because of, he was one of those guys that everybody I talked to just loved him in the locker room. He was a great guy. He was a hard-nosed player. He tried to do more than just be a long snapper. He participated on special teams. And so the team is obviously moving in a different direction. So let's see. Will it be a competition come March, or will the job just be the new player? All right, let's move on. Let's go back to the beginning of the draft here. The quarterback that they grabbed, Ange, from Nebraska, from Kansas State, excuse me, Adrian Martinez. Well, he was at Nebraska first. Talk about him. He threw for a ton of yards in school.
I think that was a good pickup. I didn't even realize his age when watching college this year. I didn't realize he would be up. So, yeah, there's a chance he could go undrafted to the NFL, but this may be a bigger chance for him to play. He did well. I think my one issue is when I was looking at his stats, he didn't play every game. So then there's that injury fear. You don't want to be stuck without a quarterback at a certain point.
Right. It's hard to put all your eggs in an injury-prone quarterback's basket, especially one that does throw a lot of picks, 31 interceptions in his career. So it's not exactly like he protects the ball. He's a little fast and loose, but should he join the Generals for camp, that will make for a very interesting battle amongst the three, because you've got DeAndre Johnson, the sort of incumbent, Kyle Lauletta, who was on the roster late in the year last year but didn't contribute, and then finally this addition here of Martinez could really spice up the quarterback competition when March rolls around. Good stuff, Ange.
Yeah, I think there will be a competition. I think it will be a good one.
It will be a good one. And, the Generals like to have that quarterback that can run. And if Coach Riley and Coach Smith are keeping the same sort of scheme in place, this could be a good fit should he slip through the cracks and end up with the Generals in camp. All right, let's see. They went wide receiver too. The Generals did lose a wide receiver to the NFL. Darius Shepard moved on, so they're looking to fill holes in that room. J.J. Holloman, what do you know about him from Tennessee State?
He jumped around for a couple teams first. He was with Georgia for a while, didn't play. He moved on. He went somewhere. Florida International, played there. So, I don't know much about him. There hasn't been too much with those top teams. Not that I'm biased that team matters with receivers, but I think he'll be interesting,
Well, they must have seen something in the guy. And he will get his shot. You don't get recruited by Georgia if you don't have talent.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So I'm excited to see what it is that they originally saw, because I don't hold against these players the fact that they've been to 2 or 3 schools or moved around, because life happens. The process isn't completely linear for everybody. That walking into a school as a 5-star recruit as a freshman and walking out from the same school as an All-American and a high draft choice is a very rare occurrence, no matter how much we actually see it. Many players bounce around. So for that, I don't downgrade a guy. I would just love to see him on the field now and what he possesses.
I think he'll be good.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. It's gonna be interesting. Defensive line, an area the Generals certainly could use some help, if only because they ranked at the bottom of the table in sacks with a total high of 10 as a team. And I believe the leading sack master for the Generals was Toby Johnson with a grand total of 2. So those numbers have to improve. Does Victor Jones, who was selected in the 4th round, possibly help them with that, Ange?
Oh, I think so. I mean, he recorded 124 combined tackles. It was in 5 years, but when you're younger, you don't get the playing time. 12 sacks, 6 pass deflections too. That stood out to me when a defensive lineman gets the pass deflections, because that shows their reflexes. So I like this pickup. And I did notice, I know I'm kind of jumping ahead, that the Generals focus a lot on defense in this draft. And I think that was great.
Yeah. And again, it was an area where many times last year, the Generals were able to pressure the quarterback, but they were never really able to take him down. And the QB was either able to run out of the situation and complete a play, or even at least get to throw it away and avoid a loss. So should Victor make it to the roster, I would love to see someone new help pressure a little bit and move those offensive linemen backwards a little bit. So we talked about defense. Who's the next player on the list that you'd like to review?
I guess next up is cornerback, Dijon Warren.
He went in the 5th round, and he's out of
Yeah.
Jackson State. So he played for Deion Sanders last year, and that's very interesting when a defensive back comes to the pros and has the pedigree of being coached by a Hall of Famer.
Mm-hmm. And he only played 3 years in college too. And when you get those 3 years and you're able to move on, it's faith in yourself if you're able to move on that quick. So I like that.
Keeping in the defensive backfield, and I don't know a lot about Dijon Warren, so purely speculative again. Typically, and I only say this just from historically speaking, not at all a small school bias. Typically, the smaller school guys don't make it out of the cycle all the way through. So this might be one of the players that will be available for the Generals at some point during the season.
I agree, especially because I think this draft class this year for the NFL, there's a lot of defensive backs going in. So I do think that looks well for the Generals.
Yeah, that is a lot of competition in the defensive backfield. I mean, a couple of players from the Generals D-backs last year moved on to the NFL, creating a couple of open spots, but another position with some heated competition. Derek Tucker, 6th rounder. He's a safety. He came from Texas Southern, another player I don't know much about. Angela, what light can you shed on him?
Well, before Texas Southern, he actually was at Texas A&M for 3 years. So I think that's really good for him. I'm going to assume he moved for playing time, which nothing against him, but now he got more opportunities at Texas Southern, and I think that's great. He played very well. He had 3 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles in his time. So
it's always eye-opening to me when you see a player who was obviously highly recruited and ends up at one of the bigger schools and then move on from there to go somewhere else strictly for playing time, or maybe the culture, or perhaps a coaching change. There's always something that happens to help a player move on. And now with the transfer portal being so prevalent, more so than ever, there's many more players with the dots on the map as their resume. And it'll be interesting. So I don't know much about this player either, but this is the good part of talking to someone like you who does. Let's talk about the defensive end that was chosen in the 7th round, Angela. Jermaine McDaniel Jr. Again, another position where the Generals could use some competition to try to pressure the quarterback. Talk about him for a second.
I think he'll be similar to Jones. He'll come in, be able to put pressure if he comes, obviously.
Right.
8 sacks, forced fumbles, another pass deflection. I think he'd be a solid depth piece. I also don't know too much about him coming from North Carolina A&T. I didn't really hear about that until the draft and looking him up.
Right.
So,
well, again, another one of those guys where let's see what they got, right? Yeah. Football's a funny game. Just when you think you know what to expect from a situation, the exact opposite happens. And something that I have always said is the one thing that the spring leagues have proven, no matter if they lasted a year, 2 years, or 3 years, there's a ton of great players from all over the place that just don't get a shot because of the sheer numbers of the situation. So this is what I like the most about a USFL, and to another degree, the XFL as well. It gives all these guys a chance to get found. And even if only one cracks through, like a Cavante Turpin, it's all worth it, right?
Yeah.
All right, we move on. Let's stay with defense first, and then we'll go back to the last player on the list. Ray Estes, another defensive back. He was the final pick. I guess this is technically the pick that was moved from the 1st round, right, to the bottom. So he was from Grambling State, and I don't know much about Ray either. What do you know, Angela?
I know he only played for 3 years. He's another one. a lot of pass deflections, which is great. 2 interceptions in 3 years. I think he's also going to be just a solid piece. I think there's a solid chance that the Generals could get him because, same as before, the amount of defensive backs going into this draft, this may be a great opportunity for him.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting, Angelo, when these defensive backs all start getting, released as the NFL pares down their rosters, getting closer. How many of them are then going to flood the USFL offseason market? And what does the second offseason's free agency period look like? It'll be very interesting for sure. Let's wrap up this review of these players. We've got one running back, Jalen Holston. He was the 9th round pick, and I don't know him either. He went to Virginia Tech, and he was there he just graduated, 6 years. So I guess he must have played the COVID year as well, or got the extra year because of COVID, looks like.
Yeah, I was fascinated by this pick because I didn't watch too much Virginia Tech. But then when I went and did my research on him, running backs, when it comes to the NFL, tend to be picked pretty late. Not always, obviously, but you find your steals towards the end of the draft. And, I feel like he's going to go unnoticed for a while. And if the Generals can get him, I think that's going to be a solid pickup. He rushed for 13 touchdowns. And what was it? 1,235 yards. He could also catch, and I always love that in a running back if you could get open for the pass as well. I didn't watch him too much, so I don't know how he plays, but I didn't see anything bad about him. And right. I think this will work well for him no matter where he ends up. I think he could surprise people.
I guess we'll find out. Can he block? If he can block, he might have a chance of sticking around, right? And also interesting would be, should the Generals add another running back to the room? They've got Darius Victor. They've got Trey Williams. They've got Kingston Davis on the roster as well, who I was told to keep an eye on this year, that he will see the ball. Adding a 4th guy, I wonder how that contributes to the numbers game when the roster starts to get trimmed down to 50, and how many running backs the Generals would actually keep. So all answers that we will start to get as March 20th rolls around, right? Angela, any plans to go to any games in Canton this year?
I don't think I'll be able to get there this year. Maybe following year. Maybe if they move closer soon, I'll get there, but I don't think I'll be able to make it this year.
That's too bad. I will definitely be out there for the first game in Canton in week 2. Definitely for the playoffs and the championship, and hopefully at least one other opportunity to see the Generals during the regular season. So we'll see how that all works out. Would have been great if you can get out there too. It's a fun time at the games.
I could try.
You never know, right? It's a long season. It's definitely a long season. But speaking of the Generals getting to Jersey for year 3, hopefully, right? Which is already less than 12 months from now, right? That they turn the corner. There's not a lot of places in New Jersey that would be the appropriate home for them. I wrote an article about this a while back, shortly after the season ended, and I've given it a little thought. Let me hear your opinions of the available places in the state. Where do you think they might end up?
I don't know, because it's also hard being the spring league, because then soccer's starting back up. So you can't even take Red Bull Arena because Red Bulls are there,
And the
women's
women's team.
They play there as well now.
Exactly.
So you can maybe look into a soccer field for colleges, a football field if you can make a deal with them, obviously.
What about Rutgers? What about Rutgers University? Do you think that stadium is available? I don't know how the school feels about having pro sports happening.
I'm not sure. And it's because I know the women's soccer, when they were Sky Blue, used to play there. And with the whole move to Red Bull Arena, Rutgers football, I think that's the perfect stadium for the fans right now. I think it's a great size to fill it up. I would love for it to happen. I don't know why I get a feeling it won't though. It's just that feeling.
I kind of tend to agree with you, and I know what you're talking about. My gut also tells me it's not going to be Rutgers, and probably because it's the one place that makes the most sense, right?
Yeah.
It's the most centrally located in the state. The size is just right because even if you get 20,000 in there, it's not going to be cavernous. It's a 50,000 seat stadium or so. But Red Bull Arena, as you said, becomes kind of inaccessible. Soccer teams protect their pitch like it's their baby, and they don't want American football teams tearing that up during their heart of their season, right? The other stadium I thought about, but I don't love the location, even though it's adequate, is Princeton Stadium. They have a 27,000 seat football stadium right on campus. It's a bleacher seated stadium, but the size is just right. It's fairly new, but I don't know. Can that vicinity accommodate? Because Princeton football doesn't exactly draw hordes.
No,
And
the stadium wise, you're right. That's great, but I'm thinking parking. Like
right.
as crazy as I'm very close to Princeton. I'm so close, and
that's your neighborhood, right?
Yeah, I don't even drive. If I go into Princeton, I'm not dealing with that. I make other people drive, and that's what I'm thinking of. Like, I think it would be a great opportunity for Princeton,
right?
But I don't think they could handle the parking.
And I agree. It's the infrastructure part from the accommodating the fans, not necessarily accommodating the league or the players. Yeah. And that is a shame because it's a nice stadium and it's in a fairly accessible location. Although once you're like driving into Princeton, it's like driving in a little neighborhood or a town. So again, game day traffic in Princeton for a pro game drawing 20,000. I don't know if they can hack it.
They would have to find like a far parking deck and make everyone just walk the distance.
Or shuttle or something. And that's never pleasant. The one time I had to do something so awful like that, I was at FedEx Field for a game, Washington, and their mass transit system does not stop close enough to the stadium where you can't avoid a long walk. It was like a half mile. It was like a mile walk or something like that, which for me is not that inconvenient. I mean, I can hack walking a mile, but there are many people that can't, whether because they're older, because they've got little kids with them, or whatever the reason. And you know, I would hate for the USFL to come to town and have some sort of like fan inconvenience as part of the plan.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. We'll see how it all plays out. The league's got to have something up their sleeve. The obvious one we left off the list is MetLife.
No, it won't.
It's not. I hope it doesn't happen because then it's going to be like an echo chamber in there. Even if you have 15,000 or 20,000, they'll all be lost and the environment will suffer. So it's all going to be very interesting. And these are questions for another off season.
Yeah.
But with that, we're just a few weeks away from training camp. And Angela, I appreciate you coming on today. One, to get to know you and talk with you. You definitely know your stuff, and I love that as well. And please do come on again with me on Generally Speaking. I think the Ange and Ange show is going to be a big hit.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. There she is, ladies and gentlemen, Angela Miele from Gridiron Heroics. And I'm your host, Angelo Fioris. That wraps up this edition of Generally Speaking. Again, remember to follow me on Twitter at NJ_Generals. Follow USFL Today at USFL Today, also on Twitter, and same handle on YouTube. Angela, what's your handle on Twitter?
Mine is Angela Miele 811. I think it's just 811. Yeah.
All right, there you go, guys. Angela Miele 811. Follow her. She writes some great articles on Gridiron Heroics. That's it for this week's edition of Generally Speaking. We'll see you next week. Thanks a lot.